So as we start into broadband efforts and talking about that, we were just interested in two questions. The first one asks, before COVID-19, to what extent was Extension in your state working on issues around broadband access and use? And then now, what is the extent that you're working on broadband issues or use? So let me just launch this and let you react to two different questions there, the before and after. So if you're just coming on, we're reacting to two real quick questions here about whether or how your broadband work and extension in your state has changed before and after COVID. So let's take a peek at this. Wow. It's not surprising that we went from a little to a lot because so much has changed in just such a short time. And I think that just really shows the importance of our time together today and looking at what can Extension do. And so I just really, again, appreciate all of you for joining us and looking at this with us. So I am going to share a PowerPoint. And as we walk through this, there are several of our National Digital Education Extension team members that will be presenting, and what I'm going to let them do as they come onto their section is introduce themselves and tell a little bit about themselves. That way you can keep up with who's speaking and where they're from. So I'm just going to lay a little tad bit of background here. Let me get this flowing. Everybody seeing the slides?
Yes.
Watching for some nods or something? All right, I got a thumbs up from Monica. Okay, cool. So, you know, we're really recognized just in that quick question that we did that there are a lot of things that have changed over the past few weeks, but one of those has really been emphasis on broadband as schools are going online, work is going online, and it's like the whole world is suddenly going online, except for where there isn't an online. And that is such a big divide that was already there that suddenly has just come into focus even more. So what are the opportunities for extension to make a difference in this realm? That's the question we're going to be talking about for the next few minutes. So we've done this a bit. I went ahead and just popped those polls up while you were coming in just to see how, who's here, and we saw that we had the largest majority of people that had county positions, but we did see across all of those areas that we had some representation. But we also saw in that second poll how our involvement has changed, and that's very interesting, but it's very appropriate because Extension does such a great job of responding to needs and being there whenever there is a new need that's felt in the community. So we'll be talking a bit more about some different ways that we can work together on this to be even better. So a little bit about the NDEET team. This group has been together for a number of years, and the people who are involved in it have ebbed and flowed over the years. There's been some people that have been fairly consistent and others that we've enjoyed having for a season as they've come and gone through. But we're really looking at how we can build capacity with an extension nationally to address issues around broadband and the skills that go with that. So in general, some of the things that we're looking at are connecting communities. What are the opportunities we have for really helping communities to think through how they become connected? And then thinking about the digital literacy skills that are there. And then how do we really focus on partnerships that make all of this work stronger. I know this slide has a lot on it, and I don't expect you to just completely digest it at the moment, but what I wanted to share is that, within this group that is part of NDEET, there are people that are providing leadership to the different sections, and you're going to hear from several of these today. And I'll also have this slide up at the end, but it just lets you know kind of how you can plug into things as we move forward. You'll be able to see how this work is coming together. The team members are national in scope. You can see just where the stars are there, where we have people from all across the nation that are joining into this work in some way, and so we're very thankful for that. And we also are very interested in growing this team, so we'll talk more about that in a bit, but just so you get a sense of where we are at the moment with the NDEET team members. All right, with that, I'm going to turn over to Gail.
Okay, welcome from Wisconsin. I'm Gail Hike. I'm a community development specialist working in broadband. Been in this arena as a state specialist for 4 years now, and before that did a lot of county work, um, and part of that was in broadband. And today our big thing that we want to do is take a look at what partnerships and collaborations are happening within Extension. Right now, broadband's an important topic across the nation. It's become, I think, as we take a look at the little poll we did in the beginning, it may not have been the topic that was important before COVID hit, but it certainly is now. And what we want to do during this session is to really take a look at who's programming in this area, what folks are doing. We're going to highlight some of the things that the ND team is doing, and have some time for some discussion so folks can share, and talk about what our partners, who our partners are, how we're working together with those. We're hoping some of the benefits that we get out of participating today is we don't want to be competing against with each other. As we take a look at the things that are coming out with funding, hopefully there'll be opportunities for education to move forward. We've seen most of our funding in access, but we want to really position ourselves so we're stronger. Let's not compete, let's not reinvent the wheel, and share some of the things we have. And hopefully through this, we'll be able to build some of that sustainability in the communities in which you work. Okay, Rachel? Well, as we look at extension, this is and broadband, this is the model that our ND team has been using. Many of our states are operating under the same type of model. This is also the model that APLU looks at as we talk about extension. Everything from when we start with some of that community planning and collaboration, areas that we're going to talk today, give you some examples of some of the work that's out there. Some of the resources you might be able to access is creating that awareness and relevance. I think right now that's something that's pretty easy to do. We'll talk about access and availability. Um, we'll have some great examples of adoption and actual utilization on how people are utilizing it. And all across the whole spectrum, we'll talk a little bit about policy and some evaluation tools to know how we're doing. Okay, first thing we want to talk about is creating awareness. Right now, I think it's awareness is on everyone's mind about broadband, and developing a team. This is where I spend a lot of my time as a state specialist, working with communities and educators, county educators on, this work. We're looking at developing that sense of urgency. It might be urgent for you, but we want to make sure that the urgency is understood by everyone. And it's not just the urgency that it's important for one individual as schools, but how is it important to all the sectors within our community, and how do we make that told? So we'll take a look at some of those, talking about building the team with the needed skills. I think this is a real important factor. Um, we don't all come with broadband. We're not all broadband techno geeks. We don't all have that knowledge of the technology and how everything necessarily works. I think our niche in extension um, is that good community development work. And as we develop, we work with communities. We know the basics of how you work, help communities identify a problem, come with some solutions, bring the right partners to the table. And that's what we're talking about right now. But we're talking about it with broadband. As we build some of those teams within your community, you're going to want to take a look at who are all the people that have a stake in this. Who needs to be at the table? And they all have different skills. You're going to want someone who has that technology expertise, but you also want people who have access to the audiences that we need to reach, understand how to work with those audiences, and support the community as a whole. Identifying a local champion. I can't talk enough about the importance of doing that. Make sure your community, who's the local champion that's going to keep things moving and keep it all together. That's real important. We find often as we work with projects, if you don't have that local champion to convene everyone and bring them together, things don't operate smoothly and we don't move forward. As you're looking at your team, you might not think of the feds as your partner, but they can be real important as you're creating some of that awareness. These are some of the partners that you might want to take a look at for information, but also as you work through that, can also provide you with some of the tools you need, as well as later on, maybe some funding as you're looking at expanding some of your programming. On the federal level, we want to look at the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC. There you'll find a lot of the rulings that are coming out with communications, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration. I'd really highly encourage you to go to their website. That's a great website as you're looking at familiarizing yourself with programs that are out there, funding. They offer monthly webinars, so it's a great spot. And U.S. Department of Agriculture. That's where a lot of the funding is being funneled through for our programs. So you want to take a look at what they have to offer and be aware of who those people are, not just at the federal level, but in your local, in your state. At the state level, Public Service Commission is where we want to look for in broadband, and make sure you know who your broadband office is. Who is the state broadband office? Do you have a state broadband office? In some instances, like in Wisconsin, it will be in the public service. And then local, these are all folks that we take a look at for local. We often think of economic development as a place to start. These are folks that maybe an organization that leads the effort. Education, we're seeing education, bringing those folks to the table. Who are your K-12? Who are your higher education? Healthcare is another great example. Healthcare is seeing a lot of changes in what's allowed through telemedicine right now, and they're an important partner to have at your table, as well as your business and service providers. Right now, business and service is really searching for ways to connect to broadband and to connect to their local shoppers and customers. Libraries are another, bring them to the table, as well as your general consumers. And I can't talk strongly enough about including your internet service providers. Become partners with them. They're the ones that are going to help you expand internet into your area. Next one, please. As we take a look at local engagements, opportunities, and strategies that you might use, this is where we said that you really want to take a look at what's Extension's niche. How do we bring people to the table? Convening partners. We've got some great examples. I work with a lot of our educators in the area. I see Chris Stark is on. Chris and I have worked in one of his communities. You might be working in an individual community. Um, there we've worked with Boulder Junction, a small community who's really been working hard to build some awareness and capacity, as well as an entire county. Your county you might be involved in working on broadband at a county perspective. Forest County is one of those that Chris and I have been working on together, where we have an entire county. What's our role? Situational analysis. These are some of the things that we might be leading focus groups. I know a lot of our communities have done focus groups to talk about what people are interested, what are the issues they're having. Doing surveys. Many of the folks will do surveys, either online surveys, paper surveys, to find out what's needed in their area. Listening sessions. I know Boulder Junction did some great listening sessions with their community, as well as used it to educate the public about what's out there, reviewing some of the data. How are we being served? Facilitating and visioning. Those are things we often do, but I think this is our opportunity to take this topic of broadband and use some of our visioning and facilitation skills, as well as being able to help identify resources. Uh, our educators are always out there looking at how do we bring resources to the table? How do we bring the state broadband specialist in? How do we bring the Public Service Commission, some of the funders? How do we connect public health and our local health organizations with the educational entities? We share the same community, we're neighbors, and often we share the same customers. So looking at how we might do that. If you're looking at a good first step, might be to just point and set up a page where broadband resources can be identified. Have a place where people can link just to see who's out there working and find some of that information. I have included a few links. There are also resources that'll be at the end of the presentation that help folks look at how do we do some of this community awareness building, how do we do some of this facilitation, and some of the policy things that are out there to help you. With that, we're going to move on to access, and I'm going to turn it over to Roberto.
Hello, I hope everybody can hear me. I apologize if you hear some background noise. I am here in the same location as my two dogs, cat and two daughters and wife, okay? So bear with me. So thank you, Gail. Now, collectively, we have identified some data sources around broadband. Those of us that have been involved in this, and you may nod your head, it's finding accurate broadband data is hard. It's really hard. The national data sets that exist have its advantages and its disadvantages. But here's a list of some that I'm going to go over quickly and briefly to kind of set the stage. As Gail was mentioning, it's always good to have some sort of an idea of where you are with both access and availability. And so there are multiple data sources that exist. American Community Survey, the 5-year data set starting last year, or the 2017 version, started publishing some very good information on internet access, type of broadband access at home, as well as type of devices or lack of devices. So that data came out just 2 years ago, basically, or a year ago, really, when it became available. And it's a really, really good data, okay? I think of all the lists of other data sources listed, that's kind of the best or more solid we can reach for. Broadband Now. So again, we have used multiple of these sources in our work. As Gail has mentioned, Monica and others will walk you through other portions of what we do as a group. But another source that came out recently is from Broadband Now. That one is decent. It's good data. You're going to see, though, that across these versions, the data varies, okay? So that's a very key thing to remember. I'm going to come back to that later on. So broadband now is data that's out there. It's good, it's decent, and you can use it to complement the American Community Survey, because this one looks at specific speeds, who has access, who hasn't, and so forth. Then we have the infamous FCC Form 477 data set, which is the most detailed and the one that's really available over time, even more than the American Community Survey. However, it's got serious limitations. So don't shoot the messenger. I'm just going to go over the issues that this data has. Number one, it's carrier self-reported. It is not cross-checked with customers at all. And so that generates a lot of issues. Second, granularity-wise, it's not at the household level like the census data is, for example, but it does focus on the census block. And so that loses a little bit, causes some issues, because if a home in that or business in that particular block is served, the entire block is considered served. So it tends to overestimate coverage. The third big issue here is that it really is talking about advertised speeds. It's not actual speeds. And I have, you know, faced this, and I'm sure Monica and others that are in the trenches, when you present this data, people are really skeptic. They're like, no, that's not true. They are selling me DSL, yet I'm not getting those speeds, you know, whatever it may be. Regardless of all these issues, though, it's a data set that's consistent over time with these issues, obviously. But more importantly, it helps to jumpstart conversations that otherwise would not take place. As Gail was mentioning before, your community will have multiple priorities. And if you are successful in gathering attention to a specific priority, you've got to provide some sort of discussion. And this data helps for good and for bad. For good, it's because it allows us to conceptualize the digital divide a little bit better. But on the bad side, it may turn people on going, you know what, that's wrong. We're going to get better data. And so at least you've got a conversation going, right? So that's always good. So you can use these kind of broadband now, and FCC Form 477 are going to be very different, but they're measuring kind of the same thing. But the FCC data provides list of providers that are reporting. It provides advertised speed and technology at the block level over time. I'm going to go over some charts in the next slide. I'm going to skip that local region. I'm going to come back to the end. Then Microsoft published a data set a while back. I'm not sure they're going to publish it every year, but that one was based on actual speeds. Their methodology was not fully disclosed, so you know, you don't really know exactly how accurate it is. They have their own little agenda going on with their airband initiative, but regardless, it is another data point that you can use to cross-check the other data. And then the Test It app, I'm sure you've heard about it. National Association of Counties rolled that out. It's open source data. It's a little bit tricky to harvest or to get the data from the server, but it's good data. It showed different results than Broadband Now, different results than Microsoft, different results than the FCC form, which are the ones that are kind of similar data sets. So the key lesson is that there's no single broadband metric, and that in and of itself generates its own sets of problems. The local regional data validation then comes in really handy. This one requires a little bit more of work. We have developed collectively multiple instruments that you can use where you go out there and kind of ask homes and individuals and businesses, you know, about their broadband connection. So that's important to keep in mind. That one can be used to really provide this cross-check at the local level, because some may see that FCC data as being national and it's kind of aggregated and I don't trust it. But the local ones, the regional one, that one is primary data, and it's very, very good when you're trying to discuss and kind of set some benchmarks and so forth. So these are some of the data sets that we have available. We have the instruments, we have the knowledge of navigating the data sets. So please feel free to reach out to your extension folks. If they're part of NDEET, they can, you know, we can work together to kind of figure this out. So I got a question. Local survey, our proffer from Missouri. Yes, I can share those with you, and there are other instruments from my colleagues as well. Shoot me an email or go through Rachel, and we'll be able to share those with you for sure. The Microsoft I can send you those links. I can send you the links where you can get all of these information. Just again, a disclaimer: you will see varying results. Okay, so don't throw up your hands in the air and say I'm back to square zero. No, you're not. You've got a very good reason to get people together to get better data, really, and jumpstart those key conversations. Next slide, please, Ms. Rachel. I know you had it. Yeah. So here are some. What can we do out? What can we? How can we extract useful information out of these multiple data sets? Well, we've come up with a couple. This is not a comprehensive list. It's a purely descriptive. We can do broadband deployment over time. My colleague Brian Whitaker and myself are working on this report that will be national, and it'll be coming out. Look at that graph there. That's kind of with the level of detail we can get. Of course, it's FCC Form 477, and our main assumption is that it is overestimating. However, it shows clearly a pattern there of this one in particular. It shows the percent housing units with access to fiber optics. You can see over time, urban has increased. Rural, which is the dark green, has increased, but not as quickly as fiber. So what I tell folks when I use the FCC data, this analogy has resonated really well. And I apologize for my colleagues. They're going to go asleep at this point because they've heard me a lot say this. I would not use the FCC data to go to Mars. Okay, I would not make it, honestly. But I will definitely use it to talk about going to Mars. So graphs like this can help set the stage for more detailed discussions. We've also developed a digital divide index at Purdue. That one has gotten a lot of traction. It factors in multiple variables, including socioeconomic characteristics that are known to impact technology adoption. So you factor all this, and it kind of really helps. What I've learned with this when we have a county level profiles is that the first question I get, the digital divide may be an abstract concept for many folks, but when you present that profile, the first thing they ask me is, how is the neighboring county doing? So at least now you've got some favorable, they're kind of receptive to talking about this, okay? The intention of this availability and access component or expertise that we have is making sense out of all this very, varying data around broadband access and availability. There's going to be some resources flying around. There are other surveys, there are other data sets, but this is kind of very quick overview with the time I was allocated. So thank you very much for your time. Some federal broadband funding, broadband NTIA, the link at the bottom, that one just updated this. But the main funders, this is around infrastructure, and something I want to make very clear, this group does not get involved in broadband deployment. The actual building the infrastructure, okay? It's not the role of extension. We can help on the planning side, on the data side, on connecting the dots. I get that question a lot. People misunderstand. They go, oh, extension, you can get me broadband, right? Like, how soon? It doesn't work like that. That's not what we do. But these are some of you can connect these communities to these funding sources. They have their own requirements. They are somewhat picky, but ARC has a lot of funding for broadband. Economic Development Administration, the same thing. Delta Regional Authority, obviously Rural Utility Service with USDA, the Reconnect Fund from USDA. Lifeline, they have telemedicine and distant education funding. You've got E-rate, which some of you are familiar. So there is a lot of federal funding going on. But as you know, in the funding kind of stuff, you've got to look at the details, okay? So don't, it takes a little bit of time so we can help as a group and our colleagues in the other states to kind of interpret those funding sources to be able to share with your communities. But again, extension, our group is not in building broadband. And the message sometimes gets confused where I get a call again and they say, oh, I hear extension is involved with broadband. When can we get broadband in our town? And no, it's not what we do. So that's part of what we need to convey accurately, is to make sure that we are resource driven. As my other colleagues will explain later, we can help you connect the dots. We can help you plan. We can provide you data, interpret that data, and we can provide resources, curriculum, and so forth. So now I'm off. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Terrence Wolfork. I'm from Fort Valley State University that's located in Fort Valley, Georgia. And my part of the presentation is on adoption and utilization. And I used to hear from our extension educators that their clientele, which would probably be rural or underserved communities, don't really use technology. And if we look at this graph, we can see that the ones that own a smartphone, especially before 2018, or own a tablet or use social media, is probably low. But now that these generations, the baby boomers and the silent generations, are having to use online technology even to order things, shop online, even food delivery. You know, McDonald's delivers, everybody delivers food now. So now that they're having to shop online, I really would like to see this data next year to see that percentage in the baby boomers and silent generation. I think that's going to really increase for those generations. As Roberto, my colleague, mentioned, that Cooperative Extension does not build the broadband infrastructure, but there are ways that Extension can still be involved in providing access. And so some of the ways, or some of the examples that I'll give, would be that the University of Tennessee and Oklahoma State University are both providing mobile hotspot lending programs. They have partnered usually with libraries, and where their patrons can go and check out a mobile hotspot and take it back to their community where they may not have that access, or the ISP may not provide it. ISP, internet service provider, may not be providing internet connectivity. The University of Washington, which we'll hear about later, is also partnering on a statewide broadband initiative. And I know it's probably been mentioned, but a Cooperative Extension definitely needs to know who's the state broadband experts so that we can help be involved in that. And what this does is build community awareness of broadband technology, as well as build demand for that broadband infrastructure for a community. So some of the opportunities that, especially with COVID-19, that has given Cooperative Extension is, our niche is providing technology education for adoption and utilization, especially for the rural and underserved communities. So what that is helping us to do is to work collaboratively. SRDC has on their website a webinar on working with virtual teams. E-Extension has on their website also webinars on working collaboratively. And a host of us, our Cooperative Extensions, are already doing or offering on curriculum on team building and working collaboratively. This leads to Cooperative Extension educating communities and clients about virtual private networks, which is VPNs, information security, and privacy also, all to help with working collaboratively, because that's all what we're doing now. We have Zoom meetings, Microsoft Teams meetings, like continuously. So we're all learning how to work collaboratively. It also helps us with our communicating with our clientele. As I mentioned, Zoom, FaceTime, Microsoft Teams, they cover all areas of Cooperative Extension, regardless if you're in the ag and natural resource, community development, whichever area you're in, those social medias, they cover all areas for communicating with our clientele, and not just for communicating with our clientele, but also communicating with each other. Just recently, the beginning of the month, the Joint Council of Extension Professionals, they had their very first virtual public issues leadership development conference, and they only had about 2 to 3 weeks to put that on. I also know that next month, I believe the National Association of Community Development Extension Professionals is going to go to a virtual conference also. So what these are giving us is the talent and the skills necessary that we can go help our communities in delivering online virtual conferences, which helps with community development and community building also. And I don't think that this is just those two. I don't think that those are going to be the only two. I think that we're going to see a rise in those virtual conferences. It may not be totally virtual, but definitely going to at least be hybrid. The Public Issues Leadership Development Conference had over 230 something people each day. It was a day and a half. And I'm sure NAPDEP is probably going to have quite a few numbers also. Also, a couple of my colleagues from North Carolina A&T and Southern University, they recently sponsored webinars in which they talked about their best practices in reaching their clientele in their market. Now, I was also talking with one of my colleagues yesterday, and he mentioned that his educators are learning about what works best in any given situation, which can be, all of this adds up to be a best practice, a fact sheet that Cooperative Extension or NDEET can put together on how to reach your clientele. And we have our agents, we have our educators, we have our specialists that are help developing this curriculum right now. With technology education, NDEET has done a partnership with the 4-H Tech Change Makers, which was a partnership with Microsoft, University of Georgia, the 4-H National Council, and our NDEET team, and 16 other states. And we did this to teach 4-H youth on how to teach older citizens on how to utilize technology. And this was earlier, but I'm sure those citizens definitely appreciate that now, on having that jump ahead of how to utilize technology, especially now that you pretty much have to utilize it. I know Purdue is doing Ready Business, and Fort Valley State is also doing technology education with our contactless payment systems, because a lot of people now are cash is still good, but no one wants to touch the cash. So how do you use an Apple Pay? How do you use Google Pay? So we're teaching those. You're teaching about online shopping and being secure, safe and secure. Additionally, as more and more people use online delivery systems, I don't believe it's going to be long before Cooperative Extension is teaching about drones, not just for delivery of doing surveying of ag land, but also doing delivery for small businesses. I could see in the very near future that drones will probably be riding up and down our sidewalk, delivering packages and everything. So that's going to be something that Cooperative Extension can definitely help in. And as also mentioned, telehealth opportunities for Cooperative Extension. My father had a doctor appointment last week, and he was telling me about how the doctors were visiting him through his web camera and everything. Pretty much he had to do his whole checkup and everything himself. I asked him, did he have to pay the copay? He said he still had to. But I think that that's going to be great. And on the next slide that we have is just examples that I've already given. It's about like a hotspot lending program that we have, partners on statewide broadband initiatives, and working with virtual teams and our tech change makers. So those were already talked about during our slides.
Terrence, if you're finished, this is Monica Babine, and I'm ready to rock and roll here. Is that right? Okay, thanks for the thumbs up. Hi all, like I said, my name is Monica Babine. I'm with Washington State University Extension. I am in our Division of Governmental Studies and Services. I lead our program for digital initiatives, which has been over 20 years of work in telework and on other broadband activities. Prior to that, I spent 15 years at a major telecommunications company. And all that to say is I've been at this a long time, maybe not quite as going back as far as to the days of the phones behind me, but pretty close. Today, what I'd like to share with you is a few thoughts about ways that you can be involved in broadband policy. I have the pleasure of working on broadband programming, like the great examples that Terrence just gave, like Gail talked about with local technology teams. But I also have an opportunity to work on research and really policy at the local, state, and national level. So as we go through the next two slides, what you'll see is that we have some hyperlinks for you to some additional resources regarding engagement with on the policy level. So we'll start with the state. At the state level, the first step, and it was mentioned before by Gail, is to really find out if you have a state broadband office. And a way to do that is through the U.S. Commerce National Telecommunications and Information Administration, NTIA's State Broadband Leaders Network. The hyperlink connects you to our network resource page where you'll find information about this group, as well as contacts for all the states that have statewide broadband efforts. And following up with your state contact is a great second step. Now, linking in with your state broadband leaders will not only provide you with an opportunity to learn more about current and planned activities in your state, but it will also help you serve as a resource for that group and also as a resource for your state legislative staff, keeping them in the loop about what's going on in your state. Gail talked about forming those local teams, and at Washington State University Extension, we have been standing up what we call broadband action teams, or BATS. And they are teams within local communities, often countywide, very often in partnership with tribes when they're in the area. And the groups that Gail had listed on that local team are the kinds of folks that we invite to that. And as she mentioned, you do not have to be a broadband expert to pull together a broadband action team. You just need to do what Extension does so well, and that's bring the right people with interest and expertise in the table and then help facilitate the conversation. Now, from a policy perspective, the reality is broadband is local. And so BAT type efforts provide a way for you to help share community or end user needs and opportunities for improvement with your state broadband leaders. So there not only is a role for helping with that planning and activity in your community, but it really gives you a chance to be able to provide information to policymakers at the state level that will impact your residents and really give them the feedback they need to hear from those who have the greatest needs. Broadband is complex and it's ever changing, and partnerships are necessary to make improvements. Terrence mentioned our Washington Hotspot project. This is just an example of one of the state activities that we've been involved in. So WSU Extension, in partnership with our Washington State Broadband Office, our Washington State Libraries, and others, are offering Wi-Fi hotspots at Extension offices, libraries, tribal and other locations. It's just another example of how you can be a part of working together with folks in your state to provide broadband access and awareness. Next slide, Rachel. Thank you. On the federal front, there are several ways that you can also engage. And you may want to start by learning about how e-connectivity, as the current federal administration refers to broadband, really is a priority. The Rural Prosperity Task Force link that we've provided has information about many rural priorities that the current administration is supporting, and e-connectivity is high on the list, and so you can find information about it as a priority. NDEET has several nationally recognized broadband researchers whom you can connect with to learn about or join in on conducting broadband research. Truly, Roberto and Brian Whitaker from Oklahoma are national, if not international, leaders in this. And so I really encourage you, if you're interested in evaluation and research, to connect with them. And then sharing this great work of theirs and others with others across the country is really an extremely important role that you can provide to help with policy input. Like with your university state legislative folks, as you learn more and begin working on broadband, you can serve as a resource for your federal legislative staff too, being that flow of information to and from within your state. There are a lot of organizations too where you can go, national organizations where you can get engaged, where you can learn more about broadband. And really, the three that I've listed here are ones that are really working to improve federal broadband policies and agency programs. There are, you'll see on the slide that I've also noted the Digital Equity Act. This was a bill introduced last year by Senator Patty Murray from Washington State. It currently is under discussion for inclusion in the CARES Act 4, so that'll be the next stimulus or relief package. And if it's funded, it will support many activities beyond those infrastructure funding sources that Roberto talked about earlier. This really gets to the heart of, I think, what so many of us could do and support. The Digital Equity Act will provide funding to help support broadband action teams, and also to provide the critical skills training, the digital literacy skills training that is needed. So it's one to watch for the future, because I do think it will be one where we all could partner and find ways to work together. You know, these three entities have been actively supporting that legislation as well as other broadband funding and programs. As I said, partners are critical to our success in increasing broadband. And of the three entities listed on this slide, I'm involved in all three. What I want to say is a really great place to start is with NDEET, as it connects you directly with other extension folks who are already working on broadband. If you have questions about policy or I can help in some way, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to help. Thank you.
So we've come around to the end of a lot of information quickly, and I've seen some good comments and questions in the chat. So we'll go back and hit those in just a moment. But I do want to share that yes, we are recording this, and yes, we will also put slides up that do have the embedded links. And then I see some other questions about other resources. So one of the things that we're really interested in right now, and I know that we've just talked through these a bit, and that's what might be some next steps that we can take together. We have over 100 people on this webinar last time I peeked at it. And so we're just very glad to see so many people. But as we talked through these different pieces, awareness is about just helping the community understand the need for broadband. And as was noted earlier, that's been very evident in this current crisis, but you're really raising the awareness about what is broadband and why it might be important for our community. Access is for us around organizing and bringing partners together so that the actual infrastructure is in place. Adoption is having people to connect directly with the service once it's available, and then utilizing it is making use, actually getting in and finding the value, and then the research and evaluation piece at the bottom. So we're interested, just as you think about this, where you might find some interest in your own work. So we just have a quick little question for you here. So kind of going off of these same ideas, if you were just saying, where your interest is and you actually can vote for more than one, what are the things that you really are interested in working on in your state? Just another minute, see lots of people voting. Just share this right quickly. So we see a good bit of balance here, really. The raising awareness about the broadband need surfaced just a little higher, but also aiding in the adoption and utilization is very strong there, but also some real interest in both helping with the infrastructure planning piece and the research and evaluation. And a few people that at this moment, this is just not where you want to spend your time, and we completely understand. I was on a call earlier today, and there was someone that commented on just having so much to do right now. And so certainly in no way we want to make you feel like this is something you got to take on with other priorities, but we are interested and curious about where there might be some interest in us working together. All right, so just going back quickly then. Some of these things have been mentioned already, but some of the ways that we could really use help from all of you and anyone else that you know that's interested. One is to identify additional resources that can be accessed by anyone in Extension or communities. And so the link there to the NDEET website is up, and you'll see that it's organized around the same structure that we've been discussing. We're looking for really great resources that are up to date that you may have on your website or know of that we could add to that to make a stronger resource center. And there's also this opportunity to join in the team. And we have two different levels that we're doing this work. There's one listserv that is a very generic broadband group. It's people that are just interested in following a conversation. They're not ready to do this as their full-time programming, or they don't have a national focus. They just really want to kind of stay in the loop of what's going on. And so we would welcome anyone to join that broadband listserv and just follow a conversation. But also, as I think every one of the presenters mentioned somewhere along the way, NDEET is welcoming additional leadership team members, and these are people that really have a vested interest in working on some of these efforts nationally to help support Extension as a larger group. And that might mean, helping to develop materials or helping to find things, but really just working together. We do have monthly meetings, though occasionally we might skip one here and there, but we usually have a touch base time and then have things that we're working on just on our own or in small teams to keep this work going. So we would certainly welcome you there. And I had this slide up earlier, but this just gives you a little bit of idea of some of the leaders that you've now actually heard speak. You've heard from Monica, Gail, Terrence, Roberto, and so you've already kind of met some of the leadership team on this. And the website's there again. And then again, my name is Rachel Welborn with the Southern Rural Development Center down on the bottom right corner. And would certainly welcome hearing from you if you would like to take part in any of the things that you've heard from today. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing. And just give you the opportunity, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat. Or you're welcome to open your mic, and welcome to chat that way too. We'll just take a few more minutes. So I did see a question around evaluation that I think was that Kim? Looking for more evaluation techniques of online programming that others have found most useful. I also know that the Program Staff Development Committee that is in the southern region is looking at this question too. So that might be another resource. I don't know what other regions are doing. I just am on their listserv, so I've seen some of their conversation along the same line as, we're suddenly having to measure impacts of Extension work in new ways. So how do we do that? So good question. Other thoughts? Most everybody's muted, so yep. Hi, Dan.
I have something that may involve Extension getting into broadband more actively. We have our Chief Information Officer looking at all the sites around the state of Florida, of which they're all over the state, and suggesting that perhaps students who don't have local connections could drive to their local Extension office and sit outside in their car and use that connection. So another use that Extension may be involved.
And I've heard several states take that approach of kind of the drive-in access, and that's just such a creative way that Extension, even if your county office is closed, to still be able to get that signal out there so that students and workers can come in. So thanks, Dan, for sharing that example.
And Dan, this is Monica from Washington State, and that's the project that we're working on right now with libraries, with fire districts, with tribes. We started and it was going to be just an Extension offering, and there was so much interest from others that we're partnering with many, many other entities. to really expand that. You know, the initial thought was this would be a great resource for our students. It's grown now to this is a great resource for communities, and so that's what we have been standing up. First sites went up last week, and we see this as not just a response to COVID, but the potential for it to be available going forward as we continue to work on the long game, if you will, the need to expand broadband availability and use to the home.
Any other thoughts, questions? We're coming close to the top of the hour. I'm putting my email here and also the NDEET website. If you want to snag those out of chat real quickly, those will be some ways that you can connect with the work. And again, just to keep in mind, if there's something you're interested in following and you would like to just join the broadband listserv, the bigger list, we would certainly welcome and be glad to do that, and just drop me an email. If you are interested in being more involved with this national leadership team, we would love to have you. So just again, let me know. Or if you go over to the NDEET site, which is that SRDC with the e-commerce at the end, if you go to that site and you say, hey, I know of a great resource that's missing, please let us know. We are trying to find those things. We certainly don't, none of us have time to go recreate something that exists elsewhere in great quality stuff. So let's support each other and help each other in finding those wonderful resources. Well, again, I want to thank you all for joining us. Thank my team, my fellow team members here in sharing their insights and wisdom on these different areas. And it's been my great pleasure to work with such a great team. And we're just so thankful for the work you're doing. And so I want you to do something for me real quickly before you leave, because I know it's like quickly we're going to jump off. I want you to do this. Everybody stretch up and breathe in. Oh, man. And shake it off a little bit. We've been sitting here for a while. And just my encouragement for you all is there's so many things. It's overwhelming personally. A lot of you have lots of folks that are in your under roof with you while you're trying to work, and it's challenging. The work stresses are high. And so if today, just think about, I love this, I stole this from Frozen 2, in case y'all haven't seen Frozen 2, but the next right thing, I love that line, might be that you take care of yourself so that you can care for the other people around you. The next right thing might be looking to the 2-footed or 4-footed critters around you and just stopping and spending a minute. Or the next right thing might be that you have something with your extension world that you really feel like is something you want to spend some time on. But take care of yourself while you're taking care of others, so that we will still be here to help serve our communities on the other side of all this. So thank you all. It's a pleasure to see you.